Welcome to TRF Tuesday. This is Trauma Research Foundation's weekly mini workshop series from Bright Voices in Therapeutic Embodiment. If you're watching on YouTube, go ahead and hit the subscribe button. It tells YouTube this content is valuable, and then they'll show it to more people. Thank you for joining us for session 2 of Sexual Grief. Bring the mind and body into sync with hostage negotiation techniques. Today's session is entitled The Question to the Hostage Taker, Empathy in the Body. It's now my pleasure to introduce to you our facilitator. Edy Nathan is a thought leader and certified sex therapist specializing in trauma and grief. She works with businesses, universities, and long-term care homes to help people understand how these areas filter through their lives and affect everything from creativity to productivity. Working together, she offers creative ways to deal with grief, trauma, and sexuality. Edy, we're so happy you're here. Thank you. Take it away.
Thank you. I'm thrilled to be here to hang out with everyone and talk about a topic that's really dear to me, which is sexual grief. Now, you may not really have heard of sexual grief, and that doesn't surprise me because actually it's a brand new term. And what's exciting is actually trying to move through what it means. So we're going to move through the meaning of sexual grief while we contemplate empathy and hostage negotiation, the second stage to the hostage negotiation. Because what sexual grief does is it forms a kinship with a sexually traumatic event that might have happened to you or a loved one, or even something that you've seen and it's affected you. And this event can span over a developmental life, your life, from a point of perhaps not being wanted as a kid to menopause, to, yes, sexual abuse, but it doesn't just land with the sexual abuse. So what we're trying to do is stop the sexual grief, which does hold you hostage, which keeps you from having the life that you could only dream about, being intimate and having good relationships, breaking that hostage taker sexual grief, and finding your own way and your own voice to being a hostage negotiator. Now, how are you going to do this? Well, this is just part 2. It's in your body, and it has to do with empathy. Because what happens with sexual grief is it kind of makes your body feel like it's out of sync. Your mind and your body are out of sync. And today, creating empathy, well, what is empathy? Empathy is the ability to understand and share the feelings of another. When can you have empathy for the self? And part of this second stage is learning how to have empathy for the parts of you that you put down. So first, we're going to do something called the identifier breath. I want you to take in a breath and even close your eyes. And as you're taking in that breath, I want you to feel that breath around your teeth. I want you to feel it around your tongue. I want you to feel it in your throat. I want you to feel it in your gut. I want you to feel it in your lungs. And as you're breathing in and out with what I call the identifier breath, I want you to be really aware of what else is going on that might need you to listen and you to say, I care and I understand that you're hurting. Now, it could be a body part. It could be your heart. It could be your gut. It could be your feet. Could be your lower back, because those are places where we carry pain. Those are places where sexual grief can also lie, and regular grief as well. That's right. Now continue to take in this identifier breath and being very aware of those places that are asking you to have some empathy, not to judge, not to criticize, not to think it needs to be any different than it is in this moment. And take one more identifier breath in. That's right. And let it go. That's right. And now, if you do have a piece of paper and a pencil or pen, or even on your computer, I'd love for you to just write down what areas of the body did you begin to notice that we're asking for your empathy. We're asking for compassion. And just write that down. Write it down. And take your time. There's no rush here. That's exactly right. And now take another 10 seconds or so, finish up what you're writing. The good thing is that you can always go back. The thing about this area of hostage negotiation, this piece of empathy, it's so interesting because when we define empathy, it's usually about having empathy for another. We rarely think about empathy for the self. And so this is an opportunity now to really curate your empathy. So last week, I invited you to go into a cave. Now I'd like you to, again, go into this cave. Now this cave is cool. It could be dark or not. You make it as safe for yourself as you possibly can. And what I'd like you now to do is I'd like you, as you're in that cave, I'd like you to close your eyes and I'd like you to imagine just for a minute some animal or some person who you have felt empathy for or towards. I know for me, like my dog has hip dysplasia and sometimes it's hard for him to walk. And I feel grief for him. And therefore, I feel empathy. I want you to take that empathy now that you have remembered and tapped into. And now think about those parts of your body that may feel out of sync and that may have been crying to be held or crying for compassion. And I want you to summon that empathy that you know you have and use it on yourself. That's right. And say it out loud. Maybe you can even say, I know, gut, that you've been having trouble expressing yourself because you're holding a sexual grief that is a natural response to an unnatural, sexually traumatic event. I'm going to say that again. Sexual grief is a natural response to an unnatural, sexually traumatic event. And I mentioned them earlier, but perhaps your gut is holding a memory of being an unwanted child or going through a really hard menopause or feeling that you were not treated well or you were bullied by someone who perhaps you had a love interest with and they hurt you. And there's sexual grief because it stops you from being able to access this empathy. Your body. Empathy can be your grief speak. And now what I'd like you to do is repeat to yourselves this mantra. You may not believe me, but I do want to know how you feel. You can even say it with me. You may not believe me, but I want to know how you feel. And I want you to really take that in. I want you to feel that. Because you cannot be held hostage by the hostage taker when you start to use empathy. It's the second stage. It's the second place where the energy of you becoming a hostage negotiator is right there. It doesn't wipe everything away, but it certainly empowers you. It gives you strength and it gives you courage. That instead of saying, I'm going to avoid, you actually invite. Now you're in this cave, this gorgeous cave, however it looks to you. And all of a sudden in this cave, you look up and you see on the walls of this cave, there are all of these tiny bits of paper. They're green and yellow and orange. And I want you to take one piece of paper off of the ceiling of that cave. And I want you to look at that piece of paper, and written on that piece of paper is some form of empathy. And then I want you to just hold it. And now I want you to take another piece of paper, and there's another comment of empathy. You can do this. I know it's been really hard. And your sexual grief doesn't have to stop you. Rather, it can inform your next steps. And another, and read it. You are good. And another, you can do this. And another, don't be afraid. It's going to be okay. And another, your sexual grief is a natural response to something that really hurt. And another, you've got this. And another, that's right. And now you've got all of these bits of different colored paper. And I want you to hold them. And I want you, because of course this is symbolic, I want you to imagine that you are putting them away into either a magic metaphorical box or perhaps in your pocket. That's exactly right. I like to offer up the idea of a box, and it's a jewelry box, and it's the most beautiful jewelry box, and it holds your jewels. It holds the jewels of your pain. It holds the jewels of your healing. And these empathy pieces of paper could go right there. That's right. Feel the compassion. What is compassion but sympathetic concern for another's pain? But now I want you to have self-compassion. I'm going to leave the cave if you haven't already done so. I didn't want to leave anybody hanging in there, you know. Okay, you're going to leave the cave. And you're just going to take a breath. I want you to now imagine that your feet have walked you out of that cave in your mind. And wherever you are, your feet are planted firmly on the ground. You actually don't feel as if the hostage taker, that the sexual grief, the inability to perhaps form a close relationship with another, or to have a successful first date, or have a long-term relationship, or have a good relationship with the love of the self. You don't, no one's going to take that away from you. And you can begin now to invite it in, because you've begun this conversation with empathy. Now, the first hostage stage is listening, to be curious. And now we're adding empathy to this. So we're going to end this really wonderful time right now with what I call safe breath. So palms are together, feet are grounded. You can feel yourself really centered and focused just in your body. And you're going to start to rub your palms together. This is safe breath. Rub your palms together. That's right. Just rub them together ever so gently. That's right. And now I want you to take in a breath through your nose if you can, and out through your nose. And now, as you breathe in, I want you to say, I am safe. And as you breathe out, empathy. Breathing in, I am. Breathing out, safe. Continue to move those hands back and forth, back and forth. That's exactly right. And then you're going to be really aware, are your hands creating heat? If they are, be aware of how that feels, because you are the creator of that heat. That's right. And it belongs to you, and it is your power. That's exactly right. And again, you're taking in a breath and you're saying, I am, and you're letting it go, heard. That's right. And then you're taking in another breath, I am. That's right. Listening as you let go of that breath. And now I want you to stop. And that is safe breath. So I want to remind you that we started with identifier breath, which just enables you to begin a conversation with your body. And when your body and your mind are out of sync, and the pop-up memories, whatever they happen to be, pop in at the most unexpected times, causing some fear or anxiety or anger, I want you to go to your identifier breath, and then you can go to your safe breath too, and everything in between. If you want to get in touch with me, you've got all my information. Please write to me, find me on my website. Let me know that where you are and what you would like more of, and I'll see you next week.
Thank you, Edy.
Like Edy said,
Thank
you
you.
can submit your questions in the chat there, and we can get to as many of them as we can in the next 5 minutes or so. One did come up. Why do we place the colored papers in a box instead of throwing them away? Someone asked.
Well, you can throw them away. That's your choice, of course. I guess for this particular exercise, the idea that the empathy, that you're holding on to the empathy, and what you're needing as a hostage negotiator is to remember the empathy. So you curate them in your box, and then you can have ready access to them in those moments when you don't remember that empathy is one way to help derail the hostage taker.
Another question that came in, can you repeat or expand on what you said about writing more of what we would like, or what we would like more of?
Sure. So I'm talking, in very broad strokes here, but you might want a little bit more in-depth information. and I'm about what I'm talking about. My book, Sexual Grief, is not yet out, but hopefully, when it comes out, it will answer a lot of questions. But because it's a new topic, there's an opportunity to explore what it really means and what it might mean to you, even just upon hearing it.
I was wondering if you could tell us about, when you start with somebody, when you're working with somebody, where do you generally start with them and why?
Where I usually start is not where a lot of clinicians start. Most clinicians will say, okay, so tell me your story. I think that when someone comes in to see me, they've been telling that story over and over and over again, and they don't even pay attention to the story really. And their emotions aren't really tapping into that story, even though there might be an emotional response. What I want to know is, what are you yearning for? What I want to know is, if you had the life that you wanted and you were walking out of here with that life, what does it look like? What I want to know is, if you were to dream big and you had the capacity to do so, how would you do that?
It's really good. Thank you.
Thank you.
How do you know when your grief is making a decision versus your wise self, especially in a romantic relationship?
So I think is that Tracy?
Correct. Yeah.
Tracy, thank you for this question, and thank you everybody for these questions. They're just so rich. So Tracy, it's complicated. It's really complex in an exciting kind of way, because just the fact that you're asking the question, you know something, and I want you to trust what you know. You know that grief could actually be informing some attraction, and it's really not an attraction that's based on some core element within you that feels, I hate the word healthy, but invigorated or alive. That actually the attraction is because there's some grief, and perhaps it's a sexual grief that is so familiar that you're going to be attracted to someone who will either cause you to feel or remember that sexual grief, or experiences it themselves. And so you get to collaborate in a way that may not actually be such a good thing.
There's another question here. And it talks about incorporating your work with trauma-informed yoga, but larger species, do you incorporate it with movement at all? Why or why not?
So on in a bigger forum, and format, what you will find me incorporating are psychodramas and role plays and movement. And actually, I'm a big believer in taking all the different aspects of where empathy is or isn't, and actually role play with the empathy, not necessarily a person, or maybe a person, but I believe in bringing Shakespeare and the chorus and the choir of Shakespeare into the role plays, into the psychodramas. So, and yoga practice is absolutely something that I incorporate, actually, by making a sexual grief machine that gets laid out with movement and sound, and then we undo it and we create an empathy machine, or we create a curiosity machine. And it's amazing what can happen with the conversation when the mind and body are out of sync. And that really helps to bring the body and the mind into sync.
Okay, I think we're just about out of time. Do you want to tell us maybe what we can expect next week?
So what can we expect next week? So what we can expect next week. So session 3 is about breaking the bond and creating a new bond of trust. So what we're talking about is rapport. And we need to develop rapport with the hostage taker. We need to develop a rapport with sexual grief. And if we don't develop that rapport, they're not going to believe us. So part of the rapport is they start the sexual grief. And I say it's they because it's that powerful. It deserves a they, and it is that conversation of, okay, I'm developing a rapport with you because what rapport enables you to do as the sexual grief holder is to begin to change, because without that rapport, change doesn't happen.
Someone's just asking, maybe we could, without getting too deep into this, can you just define hostage taker for everybody?
So I'm using sexual grief as the hostage taker. And why? Because it keeps you prisoner from the life you want to lead. It stops you from intimacy. It stops you from that love relationship. Maybe it stops you from loving yourself because you're walking around with shame or guilt because you had a bad initial outcome in your life when you engaged in the curiosity of exploring your own sexuality, a bad period story, a bad ED story. I mean, these are where sexual grief aspects can land. And how do they hold you hostage? They stop you. They stop you from going out into the world and being free to explore the parts of you that you deserve to have. And what is a hostage taker? What is a hostage taker? They're demanding, they want to use you so that you cannot be free.
Thank you.
That's a great explanation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah, what a great metaphor. Thank you. Edy, thank you so much for another thoughtful session. We are so appreciating the introduction to sexual grief. I guess we can all work on curating empathy for ourselves this week. We look forward to the next 3 sessions. And thanks to our audience for joining us. We love offering TRF Tuesday as a complimentary program to get centered and more connected to ourselves. Please share it with everyone you know and visit our TRF Tuesday library, Somatic Resources. It's on our website. You can find all of our past series and past sessions of this series there as well, and it's free to all. Behind the scenes, thanks so much to Pat Murray, Star Muhammad, Teresa Young. I'm Mary Frangie, and we look forward to seeing you the next time, same time every week. Until then, be well, everyone.